Here.
Sandra,
Here.
Hoku,
Here.
Michael,
Here.
Susan,
Here.
Erica,
Here.
Dwight,
Here.
for staff, Michelle here, Sherry,
Here.
Gayla,
Here.
Sarah,
Here.
staff AAG, Joanna.
Here.
Madam Chair, all present, and we do have members of the public present. Welcome. As we do at the start of every meeting, just the recitation of the statutory purpose for the board to protect the public health, safety, and welfare for all Oregonians by maintaining standards for quality care, professional skill and competence through the effective regulation of the practice of physical therapy. And with that, I will move to the consent agenda item. These are materials that are sent out ahead of the meeting for the board to review. For members of the public, the meeting materials that are being displayed are posted on the website so that you can follow along if you'd like with those materials. The first item that we'd like to note for the board is that there was a typo on the date at the top of the minutes. I'm sure many of you caught that. So we have made that correction on that. So any motion would have to reference as amended. And I did, were there any other questions or edits on the minutes? Ratification report. For the director's report, I wanted to highlight a couple of things because I have added some new charting and information that we haven't had previously. Of course, the first page relates to the current status of the budget through February, the end of February. First column is the first fiscal year of the biennium. Middle column is the fiscal year that we're currently in. Third is the total of the two together, and then how our run rate is looking relative to the total budget to date. There are additional financial reports that are attached at the end of the director's report. The first change on the next page, since we're getting close to the biennium, what I did was add a forecast for license counts for the current biennium. So that's the last two columns in this. I'm using a 1.3% growth. That is looking at roughly an average of what the growth has been over the course of the last four board meetings that we've reported at. And so you can see with this first column being where we were at the end of last biennium with the 65-68, our projection is to exceed that roughly by 100 issued licenses. Any questions on these projections? Okay. The count of compact privileges is interesting. We are seeing some fluctuations that the count for total compact privileges that are currently active at this point in time is down slightly from where it was at the January board meeting. The reason for that is that the expiration dates of compact privileges are tied to the expiration date of the individual's home state, not Oregon's typical expiration date. So that we have volatility in compact privileges that we don't typically see in licenses because of those expirations. we have added two pages that provide new information related to compact privilege. This is a map of individuals who hold compact privileges in Oregon. And you see in the map, the numbers that are being reflected there are the number of currently active privileges, at least as of March 3rd, where the home state, how many people from each home state that have purchased a privilege into Oregon. So you can see that Washington and Texas are our largest feeder states. And then it breaks it out by count and percentage. On the next page, it's similar, but in this case, what we're looking at is Oregon licensees, people who have an Oregon license that have purchased compact privileges into other states. So here you can see that Oregon licensees, there are 224 that have purchased a compact privilege into the state of Washington. So Oregon licensees who are making use of the benefit of Oregon being a member of the compact. Any questions on those new charts? Okay. In the cases, if we look at those trends, I've added some additional information. We have been reporting on this information regularly, where what we've done is if we look at 23-25, the current biennium, of the total number of 84 cases that have been opened, 15 of those are compact privilege holders, or roughly 18% of the total. What I've added here in this center section is if we look at the total population of license holders and compact privilege holders, and then look at complaints as a percentage of the total population, what you can see here is that the rate of complaints for compact privilege holders is higher than the percentage of population for licensees. Now, one caveat with this data is that this is complaints. This is not final outcomes in cases, and it is not broken out by type of complaint. So it is every kind of complaint from an administrative violation to patient harm on that scale. These are just total complaints, not by category and not by final outcome of the case. But the rate of complaint is higher relative to the total population for compact privilege holders. And that is going to come up again when I'm talking about budget and when we talk about compact privileges in general. Any questions on that? Okay.
I have a question, Michelle.
Yes, ma'am.
Does that hold true for other states too? Or do you have that data?
I don't have that information. I don't know. I'll just move the screen up here. I can certainly ask if anybody else is beginning to parse out the data this way.
Thanks.
Of course. I did want to make a note under education and outreach activities. You'll see that Sherry had an opportunity to give a presentation in Louisiana. Sherry, do you want to briefly give a description of what that event was?
Yeah, sure. So the Louisiana Board of Physical Therapy and the Louisiana Physical Therapy Association put on a joint educational conference for their licensees. They called it the Extra Mile Conference. And it was a 2-day conference. It was free for all licensees in Louisiana to attend. I think there was around 350 people there. And they brought in speakers from all over the country to speak about various different topics. The first day pretty much was focused on topics such as insurance, reimbursement, and kind of like issues that they've been seeing as far as in those realms. The second day, we spent a lot of time talking about, I gave a presentation on sexual boundaries and misconduct. We had Christina Lounsbury, who is the chair of the Informed Consent Task Force. She gave a presentation on informed consent. We had Catherine Caldecott from PBI gave a presentation also on boundaries. We had somebody from HPSO talk about insurance and malpractice insurance and the difference between malpractice claims and board claims. It was really a really good, interesting conference. And Louisiana has their CE kind of broken down into, they have to have this much jurisprudence, this much ethics, and this much general. So they made sure that all the presentations that were given would cover all of the requirements for all licensees for the period. It was very well attended. And yeah, it was really interesting. It was interesting to be in a group of people all from someplace other than Oregon. Usually when I speak, everybody's from all over the country, but everybody was from Louisiana. And it sounds like their board was really interested just to hear from licensees, have them there, but also hear from them. Like, what can we do for you? And, what do you want from us? So I was glad to be able to be part of it.
How did they finance that, Sherry?
I believe they had some extra money in their budget at the end of however they do their budget. And so when they were looking at, how to use that money, they decided that this would be a good way to do it.
And it was jointly funded, right, with the association?
Yeah, it was the association and the professional organization did it together.
Cool. Was it also offered virtually or just in person?
Just in person. Yeah, it was in Lafayette, Louisiana at a hotel. So I think I was going to say they tried to find a kind of central place to have it. And they weren't really sure because they'd never done it before. So they were nervous, are 20 people going to show up or how many? And they had to cap it at the amount of people that were there because, the room wouldn't have held any more. My guess is they'll probably do it again.
Yeah, it's a really cool idea, I think.
Yeah.
I like that.
Thank you, Sherry.
Thanks.
On the dashboard that we're doing for the statewide agency governor's expectations, this is your status as of the end of February. And I apologize, it looks like the image is a bit pixelated here. Highlights the strategic initiatives group has made a change in strategic planning. Previously, agencies that had fewer than 50 FTE, 50 people, were not required to have a separate IT strategic plan. They changed that just a few weeks ago to now make that a requirement for all agencies of any size. We are working with them. It would mean that we need to have, if not a full IT strategic plan, some form of strategic initiatives embedded now into our strategic plan. So we are working with the folks over at the IT division on what that needs to look like, and how to get that integrated. The strategic plan, coming back to the second and the third, I aim conservatively because we're getting close to the deadlines on having updates on those, which are in the form of a status report of June 1. I have them yellow because they're not done on that. I am expecting that the board will substantively work on that in May. So it's just a caution, since they aren't completed. The other yellow is down under the agency director 360. In this one, the 360 was completed. Everything that we need to do as an agency was completed before the deadline. However, the governor's office, the DAS portions of follow-up and meeting with me as the director has been delayed until summer for a number of reasons. So the whole process hasn't been completed, even though we did as an agency what needed to be done for that particular outcome. Any questions on any of those? Okay. There are also materials that have to do with the statewide customer service policy requirements that were published for all state agencies, as well as a draft version of the board's policy and strategy, which is due at the end of this month, that was there for your review, as well as another policy that was issued just in the last couple of weeks, which is a standard statewide administrative rulemaking policy. Implementation is due by the 1st of May, and a copy of that statewide policy was attached in your packet. That one, we are probably 85% of the way to the requirements of that policy that are already our standard practice, but there are a couple of elements that we'll need to modify to match that policy. So with that, I'll pause if there's any questions, or if anybody had any questions or feedback on either of those two policies or the board's draft customer service policy and strategy. Okay. Then with that, Madam Chair, unless there are any other questions or comments on any of the materials in the consent packet, you could consider a motion on those materials.
I just have one question, and I'm not sure, I might already know the answer. I was just thinking about workforce and number of licensees and attrition rate versus new grad rate and what that looks like over time. So I know the workforce data will eventually have that, but I'm just wondering, like, if it would be helpful at all to know how many people are ending their license in a period versus how many new licensees we have.
The data that's being compiled by the Oregon Health Authority workforce folks, part of what they do gather from those surveys that licensees do is a question on what their like projection is going forward about reducing hours, increasing hours, or leaving the profession. So we will have access to that information once they have it fully available.
Yeah, I was just thinking it lags, and I was kind of wondering if the number of licensees that are dropping versus the number of new licensees adding would be sort of a leading indicator. But
yeah, it's a good question. We can flag that question so that when we do have the data, make sure to compare it back to what we're seeing for new purchases. And we could probably see, at least for the Oregon schools, kind of what trends they're seeing for enrollment and graduation. Sarah?
I was just going to say that while from an administrative standpoint, having the biannual expiration date is really helpful for workload, that is one of the pieces where we lose a little bit of visibility, because they could have stopped working at any point in the last 2 years, but their license remains active until that expiration date that everybody hits on the same day. So Great question, but just wanted to give a little bit of context about why that's really hard to visualize without that OHA data.
Thank
Fair
you.
point.
Yeah.
Are we ready for a motion? Okay. I move to approve the consent agenda items as amended.
I second the motion.
Moved and seconded. Timothy,
Aye.
Aaron,
Aye.
Sandra,
Aye.
Hoku,
Aye.
Michael,
Aye.
Susan,
Aye.
Erica,
Aye.
Dwight.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the motion carries unanimously. The next item on the agenda is an opportunity if any of the members of the public in attendance wish to make public comment to the board. You can use the raise hand feature and we can recognize you. And I'll wait just a moment to see if anybody does a raise hand. Madam Chair, I'm not seeing any indications at this time.
Okay, we can move forward.
The next item on the agenda is the opportunity for delegate reports from participation in PTCC or the Physical Therapy Compact Commission and the Federation of State Boards in Physical Therapy. I can start with a note that Vermont, as of March 1st, is now fully active, issuing privileges, member of the compact, and Alaska is anticipated within the next month or so, sort of pending, which is exciting news. I think Vermont takes us up to 33 active states, roughly, and then Alaska would be another addition there. Committee reports.
Yeah, this is Erin. I attended, let's see what date, it was February 11th, attended the first Compact Committee of 2025. We're under some new leadership, so it was a fun meeting to kind of meet new people from last year, and we're getting ourselves organized. And there's still discussion about what it means to flag for investigations still, even in that meeting in February. And I believe the next step is that topic is going to the executive committee, which Michelle, I think you're involved with, but I'm not quite sure. So I think that was the plan. And then our next meeting is April 29th, and we feel very more organized this year with dates in advance, and I'm loving that. So
Good.
dates planned in advance is easier to make.
Absolutely.
I can jump in as well. I'm on the Education and Outreach Committee. We have not yet met in 2025. We have that scheduled for 2 weeks from now. But I will just report that I was named as the chair of that committee, unbeknownst to me. So I'm really excited to get started in that role. And if you have anything that you want me to bring to that committee, please let me know.
Thank you,
Sarah,
sir.
it's for the compact education and outreach, yes?
Excellent. How about on the Federation side, committee or task force reports for participants?
Hi everyone, Michael. So I'm on the task force for animal physical therapy. The group has met once. The aim for the group is to develop model regulations there are, I believe, 4 states in the US that have a fairly comprehensive view of regulations tied to practice for animals. And so that's our role, and we're just getting started. I think one of the things we'll want to get input on is any thoughts about additional training or the lens or history that we've had with the veterinary board as related to competencies for practice with animals.
Great. And a couple of upcoming webinars and trainings. April 16th, there is a regulatory hour training with Dale Atkinson, who has been providing regulatory focused training for boards from all types of professions. It is open to the public. This April 16th session will focus on board efficiencies. And then April 24th to 26th, there's a regulatory workshop for board members and staff with both virtual or in-person options. It's targeted not mostly, but for new members or staff, but it's equally an opportunity to have conversations about the regulation of physical therapy with board members and staff from all jurisdictions that are part of the FSBPT. Any other updates or questions related to FSBPT?
I just wanted to mention I'm lucky enough to be able to go to the April 24th, 26th regulatory workshop in person. Curious if anyone else is going to be there, but also I'm happy to report back anything I learned from that.
That's great. And I will be there as well, Erin. Okay. Next item on the agenda relates to our standing item for strategic planning. We were originally looking to do some work on the development of the next iteration of our strategic plan at this meeting. However, another agenda item we'll talk about in more detail. The association did end up introducing a bill, House Bill 3824, that is a massive bill that would implement Model Practice Act as well as pursue clear statutory authority relating to the ability for PTs to do administer vaccines. Well, I'll get into the details of what it is, but it very large scope. And my recommendation is if the bill passes, then that drives a lot of the focus of the board because there will be a significant amount of policy and rulemaking involved in implementing the bill. If the bill doesn't pass, since pursuing the Model Practice Act has been already a strategic initiative identified by the board, then I would anticipate strategic initiatives to continue pursuit of legislative fixes. So since we don't know where things are given where they are in the legislative session, we have an unknown today. So the plan is the development work will continue at the May board meeting, where we'll have a much better sense of where that bill is going and what the focus will need to be, at least on the next 2 years of the strategic plan. The link down at the bottom, of course, is a link to the current strategic plan and what's already been identified. Any questions or concerns from the board on this approach? Okay. The next standing item, roundtable and future agenda items. This is where we maintain the list of topics that the board identifies for future meetings. There are 2 topics from the list that has been maintained. Implicit bias. The training materials that were discussed in prior meetings were sent out to board members for completion. And the report on the Oregon Data Equity Summit is scheduled for today's meeting. The Oregon Ethics Commission public meetings law training did get scheduled since the last meeting. That's scheduled for May. And then the other items that have been previously identified by the board, not yet scheduled, but intended to appear on future agendas. I am proposing a topic that we add for future agendas for topics related to the House Bill 3824. For example, dry needling, sonography, image ordering are some of the other things that we'll talk about briefly. But I thought it would be appropriate to bring in information and speakers relevant to what the bill would be implementing. Are there other topics that any of the members would like to see us add to the list, or any recommendations for specific prioritization for sooner rather than later as we plan out future agendas?
This would be maybe for later, and I'm hesitant to bring it up as I'm retiring the board. But the conference that Sherry went to, when I first heard about that, and I heard Sherry talk about it today, it's just a lovely time for like regulation and the association, and that for great communication. If the board and the association were interested in doing that in the future, and something happened with HB 3824, it would be a lovely opportunity as a communication mechanism to host a conference.
Okay. We will add discussion on that and to a future agenda. Other comments?
Michelle, this is Hoku. I think my question pertains more to the previous slide about strategic planning. And I'm just wondering how recent changes will affect like our commitment to DEI, and whether that's like a state run program. Anyway, just wondering what that's going to look like. And then referencing the previous topic about FSBPT, just wondering whether the Federal Federation of State Boards, if that organization receives federal funding at all?
I'll start with that question. My understanding is that they do not receive federal funding. So changes with, for example, Department of Education do not have a direct impact. As to the state of Oregon, the governor has issued a press release confirming commitment to DEI priorities within the state. And so there has been no change with regard to that plan or resources or services within the state. There may be some elements for some agencies do receive grant funding within the state of Oregon. And so there may be specific projects that get impacted that are federally funded, but that there are a lot of moving parts to that. And court cases. So at this time, there's no change as far as the state's perspective on those.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions or comments on these items? Okay. The next item on the agenda is a question about the current PTA reentry to practice policy, or the reentry to practice policy with regard to PTAs. This is coming up, and I'll bring it up on the screen now, what the current policy is. Reentry to practice requirements are defined in statute, but what the specific demonstration of competence is isn't explicitly defined in statute. And so the board has identified requirements for PT and PTA. For PTA, which is this section here, what has historically been identified is completion of the college course, PTA refresher course that's offered by Lake Superior College. And the for the last number of years, the board has only required that course for PTAs. However, the current policy, as you can see in the highlighted yellow with the strikeout, the current policy is written in such a way that it's the course completion at a minimum, which leaves open the potential need to do other things, even though historically the board has not for PTAs required anything else. We have received questions from individuals that are looking to re-enter the workforce after a lapse of greater than 5 years. And so they seek clarification on what exactly it is that they need to do to re-enter the profession. And so we're bringing this to you with a recommendation that if you made these changes, it would be consistent with what board practice has been in the application of the policy, that would more clearly communicate to folks before they get started or apply what they can expect they will have to do. So that's the question before the board. Do you want to leave it the way it is now, in which case it would need to come to you to make a determination case by case for PTAs, as is true for PT applicants? Or are you comfortable making a modification to the policy to make clear that the requirement to demonstrate competence for PTAs is the successful completion with a passing grade of the identified course?
Michelle, can I just add a little bit about the course?
Yes, ma'am.
I think sometimes when we see course, we think it's like a 1 day or a weekend or something, but this is actually a very extensive class. I think it's like 12 weeks or 16 weeks semester course that's graded from Lake Superior College. So it's a very, very extensive class, more than I know. I see course, I think like a day or a weekend, but it's a pretty extensive class.
And it is, thank you, Sherry. It's a 2 college credit course, which means it's equivalent to 20 CC hours of continuing education, continuing competence credits.
What's the cost on that?
That is a question I do not have an answer to. Gayla, do you happen to know?
I don't know either. I think it's, as if you were taking a course through their community college, whatever they charge for their courses at that school. I don't know that.
We can find out, Sandra, and send out the information.
I can also look it up. I just was wondering whether it was affordable for people or not, basically. And I don't know what affordability is, but if it's $10,000, then that would be a lot. But
it's a 2 college credit course, so typically, kind of in the state model, it wouldn't be near that amount.
Reading from the website on Lake Superior College, it says the course is a 2-credit course, so costs are based on current tuition rates. As with most colleges, textbook costs are additional. Typically, the cost to take the course is approximately $400 to $450, including tuition and fees. This does not cover the cost of the textbook.
That's good.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Michael.
Quick question. Would it have to be this particular given by that particular institution, the Lake Superior? Or are there other institutions that are given the same course?
Not to our knowledge.
No, and there's not a similar course for PTs. So as far as we know, this is the only course that's offered for PTAs.
Okay, thank you.
I think there would be market for both of those if there are any educational institution representatives watching or. So then the question would be, does the board want to make this change? And if so, it would need a motion. If you don't want to make the change, then there could be no motion and the policy would stay as is, or you could make amendments and then make a motion.
Michelle, I have a question. How many PTAs have done this? Or in the state, says the policy was adopted in 2010. Do you know how many?
I will turn the question over to our archivist to estimate. Sherry?
My estimation is that it's just around 5 or so. Not a ton, but like Michelle said in the beginning, the people have taken it. That's we haven't required anything other than that.
Okay, that was my follow-up. So of all the people that have done it, that's all they've had to do.
Correct.
There's nothing else.
Correct. So even though the policy is at the minimum, it's all they've had to do.
Okay. I think it simplifies the line. We're not doing anything else, then it just supports what we have been doing.
Yeah, I think I support this change. I am just curious, what is the definition of when someone would be defined into this category of needing to re-enter?
It would be if they've previously held a license longer than 5 years ago.
So they let their license expire.
Yeah.
Okay.
One thing I wanted to mention is that we don't have a practice requirement in Oregon. So if somebody maintained their license but didn't practice, they still had to do continuing ed. But someone could maintain a license for 20 years, do the required continuing ed, but never have practiced either, so without having to take this kind of refresher class. So just something to think of in our rules.
There is actually, I believe it's publishing this week, the HRRI.org, the Healthcare Regulatory Research Institute, is publishing research specifically on reentry to practice. It's an academic paper that looks at essentially the atrophy of clinical skills over time. And it does make some preliminary recommendations that pertain to that practice hours and things that boards may consider. So that's certainly something that we can bring to a future meeting to discuss if the board is interested.
So, uh, I can make a motion that we adopt the changed policy as written on the screen.
That works. Is there a second?
Second.
Oh,
Sorry.
I think Tim edged out just by a microsecond. First and seconded, Timothy,
Yes.
Aaron,
Aye.
Sandra,
aye.
Hoku,
Aye.
Michael,
I
Susan,
Aye.
Erica,
Aye.
Dwight.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the motion carries unanimously. Madam Chair, before we enter into the next agenda item, may I request a short recess?
Yes. How long do you want?
How about 5 minutes?
Okay. The time is 9:22 a.m. and the Oregon Board of Physical Therapy is taking a short recess. The time is 9:28 a.m. and the Oregon Board of Physical Therapy is back from recess. And we are going to shuffle the agenda order again and enter into a short executive session. The members of the public will be moved into the waiting room for that, and then we'll bring you back in once the executive session is over.
Okay. And Madam Chair, if you go ahead and read the basis for entering executive session, and then I'll move the public attendees after that.
Just a second. Sorry, I wasn't prepared for that. Okay. In executive session, the board may consider information obtained as part of an investigation into the conduct of licensees or applicants. Consider investigatory information and reports under ORS 676.165, or consider other information or records exempt from public inspection, including advice from the board's legal counsel. Let's see, the time is 9:30 a.m. and the Oregon Board of Physical Therapy is exiting public session. The time is 9:41 a.m. and the Oregon Board of Physical Therapy is exiting executive session.
That works. I'll admit Amy, and then you can resume public session.
Okay.
Okay, here we go.
Okay. The time is 9:42 a.m. and the Oregon Board of Physical Therapy is back in public session.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next item, let me bring up the slide, I believe is board motions as a result of executive session.
Okay. In case number PT 833-11/23, I PT 847-02/24 and PT 858-05/24. I move to reject settlement offer.
I second the motion.
Motioned and seconded. Timothy,
Aye.
Aaron,
Aye.
Sandra,
Aye.
Hoku,
Aye.
Michael,
Aye.
Susan,
Aye.
Erica,
Aye.
Dwight.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Next case.
In case number PT 825-09/23, I make a motion to close case.
I second the motion.
Moved and seconded. Timothy,
Aye.
Aaron,
Aye.
Sandra,
Aye.
Hoku,
Aye.
Michael,
Aye.
Susan,
Aye.
Erica,
Aye.
Dwight.
Aye.
Erica, just to confirm, that was an aye?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and aye.
In that case, motion carries unanimously.
In case number PT 839-12/23, I make a motion to offer settlement of a 6-month suspension and civil penalty of $5,000 with $2,500 stayed upon completion of a board-approved boundaries course for violations of ORS 688.1352, ORS 688.1402, little a, little k, big A, little t, OAR 848-040-01055, and OAR 848-045-0020, 2, little I, little m, little n, little p, big A.
I second the motion.
Moved and seconded. Timothy,
Aye.
Aaron,
Aye.
Sandra,
Aye.
Hoku,
Aye.
Michael,
Aye.
Susan,
Aye.
Erica,
Aye.
Dwight.
Aye.
Madam Chair, motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Next case.
In case number PT 888-12/24, I move to close case.
I second the motion.
Moved and seconded. Timothy,
Aye.
Aaron,
Aye.
Sandra,
Aye.
Hoku,
Aye.
Michael, Susan,
Aye.
Erica,
Aye.
Dwight.
Aye.
Madam Chair, motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Next case.
In case number PT 890-02/25, I move to close case.
I second the motion.
Moved and seconded. Timothy,
Aye.
Aaron,
Aye.
Sandra,
Aye.
Hoku,
Aye.
Michael,
Aye.
Susan,
Aye.
Erica,
Aye.
Dwight.
Aye.
Madam Chair, motion carries unanimously.
Oh, hey, how are you?
Thank you. Next case.
In case number PT 891-02/25, I make a motion to offer a settlement of 1-year suspension and a civil penalty of $3,000 stayed with proof of successful completion of board-approved boundaries course for violations of ORS 688.1402, little a, little e, little k, big A, little m, little o, ORS 688
Well,
dot
the
020
resolution will be out and then.
1 little a.
I'm sorry,
Oh,
Hope.
yeah.
We're getting some cross chatter, I
Do you
think,
have
from
that
somebody's mic.
Information.
I'm hearing somebody else speaking. Just want to make sure we get a. Okay, I think we're covered. I apologize for having you have to start over.
No problem. Starting over. In case number PT 891-02/25, I make a motion to offer a settlement of 1 year suspension and a civil penalty of $3,000 stayed with proof of successful completion of board-approved boundaries course for violations of ORS 688.140 little a, little e, little k, big A, little m, little o. ORS 688.0201 little a. OAR 848-015-0020 1, 2, 3, and 5. OAR 848-040-0105 5. OAR-040-0145 5. OAR 848-045-0020 2, little I, little j, little m, little n, little p, big A, little r, big C.
I second the motion.
Moved and seconded. Timothy,
Aye.
Aaron,
Aye.
Sandra,
Aye.
Oku,
Aye.
Michael,
Aye.
Susan,
Aye.
Erica,
Aye.
Dwight.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the motion carries unanimously.
Okay, thank you. Next case.
In case number PT 885-01/25, motion to offer a settlement agreement for a reprimand and civil penalty of $500 for a violation of ORS 688.140 little a, OAR 848-045-0020 2, little a, little I, little j, little v, and big A.
I second the motion.
Moved and seconded. Timothy,
Aye.
Aaron,
Aye.
Sandra,
Aye.
Hoku,
Aye.
Michael,
Aye.
Susan,
Aye.
Erica,
Aye.
Dwight.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the motion carries unanimously.
Okay. Next case, or is there any?
I move to ratify the administrative closure of cases PT 897-03/35, PT 898-03/25, and PT 899-03/25.
I second.
Clarification on the motion on the first case number.
Yes.
Could you repeat?
Sure. I move to ratify the administrative closure of cases PT 897-03/25. Should I keep going?
Probably.
Okay. PT 898-03/25 and PT 899-03/25.
Thank you.
I second the motion.
Moved and seconded. Timothy,
I'm going to abstain on this. I believe I missed part of that discussion.
Aaron,
Aye.
Sandra,
Aye.
Hoku,
Aye.
Michael,
Aye.
Susan,
Aye.
Erica,
Aye.
Dwight.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the motion carries.
there any other cases?
There are no more cases at this time, Madam Chair.
Okay, what's next on our agenda?
Next on our agenda, I believe we revert back to the first of the presentations. I will scroll. So we're now under item E2, the Data Equity Summit highlights. I will turn it over to Sarah and let me know when you'd like in advance.
Sure. Let me try to get my head back to where it was 30 minutes ago. We spoke a few months ago that I had attended a data equity summit in November. This was a 2-day virtual summit. The audience was state agency employees. And it arose out of a group that I am involved with that's data coordinators. Basically, every agency has someone in their agency who's supposed to be kind of responsible for making sure that our data is open and accessible. And out of that, they have been having a lot of conversations about data equity. DAS has a new data equity consultant. She's not so new anymore. And so they decided, what if we all got together and essentially, got to present or got to talk on topics surrounding data equity. They anticipated about 100 people might show up. In the 2-day virtual summit, they had 936 participants. So it was, there was a huge interest. And frankly, if I had known how engaging it would be, I would have suggested that we all attend because it was fantastic. And when we're thinking about data equity, the big piece that we really kind of discussed was, well, there were a lot of things discussed, but the keynote really kind of focused on this idea of a data imagination and thinking about how we play into the data that we're reporting, right? Data is not just for data's sake. Data is used to guide policy, and the lens that we view that at, the lens that the data analysis takes can ultimately, push through that policy, right? And so it was a really fascinating 2-day summit. I did just grab one of the quotes that our state chief data officer, Catherine Darnell, posted, that state records are never just papers. They are metaphors for accountability, for the integrity of citizens' rights, for the depth of democratic culture. And you can tell by that quote that she pulled that this was a big librarian nerd session, right? All of these librarians were just so giddy about this. And it was great. You can jump to the next one. And so I did just want to highlight the keynote by Dr. Andres Lopez. He works at the Coalition for Communities of Color. He's a sociologist. And he really kind of presented and kicked this event off with this idea of the data equity imagination. I could give you what I got out of it, but his keynote is actually available on the Data Summit website. So I would encourage anybody who's interested in this to go look at that, because I think, particularly because we do have a lot of practitioners in the room, when you're thinking about research and you're thinking about, best practices, and it really kind of gives you a lens to interpret data and to, if you were a researcher, create data. So I would definitely encourage anyone to go watch that keynote. I'm happy to send out the specific link. And then there were 4 other sessions, and the slides from the first 3 sessions are available. Making data accessible was really, again, this is one that I would encourage anybody who has any sort of role in communicating with the public, whether that be at your hospital or as a state employee or even in private practice. Making data accessible was fantastic because it really gave us a lot of ideas about how folks who have different ways of interpreting information can access that access information, right? So it went into things like, how do I make my website accessible for a screen reader, to, giving different what's the word I'm looking for, means to express data. Data analytics and data equity, and then building data equity capacity. Both of those were a lot of case studies. So those were, particularly the data analytics piece, were really about different folks from different state agencies came in and they said, here's a research project we did, and here's how we approached it with a data equity lens. Building data equity capacity also went into, how do we set up our state agencies so that this is just built into our systems? This is baked in. It's not something that we have to go do extra, because it's just the lens that we look at things through. And then finally, empowering Native voices. This is the only one that the slides aren't available, and this was fascinating for me because it really was a lot about the intergovernmental relationship between individual state agencies and Native nations, right? And so how do we approach this intergovernmental relationship? How do we collect data in a way that can serve our citizens, who also are citizens of a different nation as well? And so a big piece of this, where this might come into play is particularly in this legislative session, things like REAL-D, things like the upcoming SOGI requirements. When we're thinking about data equity, the big takeaway was, we often view it as we are studying other people. But what an equitable lens is more of, how can we work together with these communities so that the data that we might be collecting is for the communities that we're studying, right? How can we have it serve them? And not in a, we say that you guys need this, therefore we're going to give it to you, but let's talk together as a community, and incorporate the communities that are being studied in the data collection, in the data analysis, and then ultimately in whatever policy decisions may come out of it. So I did write, all sessions are now available to watch at Oregon.gov. I did not realize that some of the links are just slides, so you can't watch all of them, but that keynote by Dr. Lopez is available to watch. And then it was so successful. This was the first session. Oh, and I forgot, I mentioned that 936 people participated. There were 37 state agencies represented, 11 different county offices sent folks, and then 30 other organizations, including universities and cities. So it was extremely successful. And I think that because it had such a wide interest throughout all different levels of state government, local government, special districts, they are very anxious to get a 2025 summit scheduled, and I will be inviting all of you to it, because as board members, you can absolutely attend a summit for state employees, and I really enjoyed it. So yeah, any questions on that before I dive into my next item? Cool. The next thing that I'm going to talk about is PT Compact trends. And Michelle, feel free to jump in, because I know that we're having the budget discussion shortly after this. So if there's anything that you want to flag that I'm missing, feel free to pop in. But I just kind of want to talk about this because particularly I think that we see the stats that Michelle presents in the executive director's report about the compact. We see it every meeting, and at least to me, the compact still feels very opaque, right? It kind of feels like, okay, well, we've got, some people who are allowed to work here, but we don't really know much about them. And so we kind of did a little bit of a deep dive on how folks are using the compact, and particularly because the way that the compact handles privilege numbers is different than how we handle license numbers, right? So if you are an Oregon licensee, you get assigned a PT number the first time that you're licensed here, you could go move away for 20 years, and when you come back, we're going to give you the same license number. That's not how the compact handles their numbers. So you get an initial license, or you get an initial compact privilege. It may lapse or expire or terminate. They use different terminology. And then if I want to come back, I get issued a new compact privilege number. And so initial purchases may not be the first time that I'm actually interacting with the compact. And it may not be the first time that I'm purchasing a compact for a specific state. And so if we look at the number of numbers that we have, we've issued 1,341 numbers, but we've only issued compact privileges to 1,253 people, right? And so there's kind of this section of folks who have renewed, and they're over here, and then there's folks who have gotten 2 initial numbers, and it's kind of a renewal, right? Like, they clicked a different box, but for all intents and purposes, it's the renewal. So I was kind of trying to assimilate some of that data to give us an idea of how often are folks using the compact. And what it looks like is about 2/3 of folks so far in the 7-ish years that we've been issuing compact privileges have only ever purchased 1 privilege. They got that initial, and they either let it lapse or it's still active. And then this 1/3 of folks have made at least 2 purchases, right? So that might be that they, purchased 3 initial compact privileges, because we have about 10 of those folks who have had 3 different numbers issued to them. Or they might be our one individual who has renewed his compact privilege for Oregon 6 times. And so getting this idea of kind of drilling down about how folks are using it, is it just really kind of a stopgap between licensure or between moving to Oregon and full licensure? Are they travelers? That sort of thing is kind of what I wanted to drill down at. And I wish I had conclusive answers for you, but we'll keep going. If you want to jump to the next one, Michelle. And so Michelle talked a little bit about the Oregon workforce. We kind of have this subset of folks who are able to work in Oregon who don't have full licenses. Right now we've got, between PTs and PTAs, we have just under 6,500 active licenses and about 565 active privileges. 158 of those people either had, 158 of those people at some point in their career had the other type of licensure, right? So they were able to, or the other type of authorization to work in Oregon. So if they're a current active licensee, up to 158 of them at some point held a compact privilege, and vice versa. Compact privilege holders who maybe held a license in the past. Can I jump to the next one, Michelle? And this gives you a little bit more of a breakdown of all of those 1,253 individuals who have ever had a compact privilege. And so we can see here that 41% of those folks only ever had a compact privilege. They never engaged with the board directly for full licensure. Sorry. 82%. I said 41% because I was looking at the active compact privilege. But everybody in the blue and the orange, they're only ever interacting with the compact. Maybe they talked to us, maybe they called us, but they didn't actually go through the application process. This gray slide is about 18% of folks who have had both. They've gone through the application process and they've gone through the compact privilege purchase process. Michelle, do you want to jump to the next one? And so I really kind of wanted to narrow in on this gray pie segment. So going to the next slide, you'll see another pie. It's what that gray segment is comprised of. So if you want to jump to the next one, Michelle. So out of that 228 folks, 42% of them currently hold an active license, right? So at some point they had a compact privilege, now they're license holders, right? Maybe they became full residents of Oregon, or maybe they, purchased that as a stopgap while they were on their way to licensure because their job had to start and they didn't have time to get the full license yet. 27% of them hold a compact privilege. So those are folks that I know when the compact was initially talked about, there was a lot of concern that, oh, well, this is gonna take away from our license base and push them into compact privileges instead. And we kind of see that doesn't really bear out. 27% of folks who have held both, so only 63 people, have moved from a license to a compact privilege for Oregon. And like Michelle showed in that initial map earlier, I would guess that a big chunk of these folks live in across the Columbia River. We can drill down a little bit more into that in the coming months, but I think that those concerns that it was going to kind of cut away at our own licensing base, this 27% shows that it's not really a true concern. And then 31% of those don't have either, right? They had a license and they had a compact, and now they are not authorized to work in Oregon anymore. So those may be folks who moved away. Those may be folks who moved to a home state that doesn't participate in the compact. There's a lot of reasons for that. But generally, this is kind of the breakdown of folks that have held both at some point. So if you want to jump to the next. And so this is a really high level kind of breakdown of who those compact privilege folks are. And like I was saying, the use patterns are a little bit more complex than what we were anticipating in 2016 when the compact was first getting started. The crossover that we have it in our minds, I think, again, speaking to the opacity of the compact, because it's kind of this separate but connected entity. The crossover between licensure and compact privilege holder is more limited than we thought it would be. And then again, most compact privileges are short term, so they may have only gotten it once. And so as I was thinking about, what are the drivers for this, the data that we have, we really can't determine what the drivers for that are. And so some of the things that I was thinking about, how do we determine what causes someone to get a privilege versus a license, that sort of thing, is that we could survey those 1,253 individuals, right? Why did you choose the compact over a license? Did you go on to get a license? Why? Why did you move from one direction or the other? Did you ever work in Oregon, right? Because I think that that's a big piece of our OHA data that's really missing, is these folks who are authorized to work in Oregon, but we have no idea if they are actually serving Oregonians at any point. And then again, like I said, I am now on the Education and Outreach Committee. And so I would really like to potentially see if other states want to join in on this. If we wanted to do a little bit more of a micro study of compact privilege holders across a few states to see what are your motivators for going with a compact versus going with the licensure. And one piece with that can also be, when we look at how many Oregonians hold Washington compact privileges, it's about 3-ish times the reverse, right? It's something in the 80s of folks who have Oregon privileges who come from Washington, and a 220-ish, I think, was the number for the opposite. And so some of that might be related to licensing cycles, right? And so there's just a lot of different elements that without really asking the people involved, we just don't really have a way of knowing. And that is what I have. Michelle, do you want to, I think you have an extra slide.
I do have a bonus slide, but it does shift a little bit toward budget and revenue. So before that, probably good to pause here if anyone has any questions for Sarah. Okay.
I'm fine with that.
So another perspective in, looking at the compact is when we talk about flow and what was being anticipated back in 2015, 2016, before the compact existed as it was being implemented. When the compact privilege fee was being conceptualized both by the PT Compact Commission and how the funding model would be established, and then what the states or the member states would charge and how that money flows. So I wanted to do two things with this slide. If I start kind of in the center of the page, the compact privilege fee that is paid by the purchaser for the authorization to work in Oregon is $95. $45 of that goes to fund the PT Compact Commission itself. There is a $2 processing fee that is taken out of the fee that the state charges. So if you look at our compact fee rule in 848, you'll see it listed as that the money that comes in is not the $50, it's $48 because of that $2 fee. And that's to cover just the processing of that. It doesn't fund operations directly, it funds the payment processing. In the Compact Commission, states or member jurisdictions set the amount of the state fee, which would be these two added together. And there, I think I've showed it at prior meetings, there's pretty significant variability. Arizona charges nothing for their privileges, and District of Columbia, I think, is roughly $265. Now that's the total, so they're taking under the 265 is the total fee is more than that, but what they've done is they've taken their fee to state and they've made it equivalent to what their application fee is for the District of Columbia. So in Oregon, one of the assumptions that was built into when the statutory language was being adopted and the fees established, there were some assumptions that there would be very little that would need to be done on behalf of the licensing board or interaction with and management of compact privilege holders. That has not proved to be true. One perspective is in the director's report where I showed the case and investigative load relative to compact privilege holders. Another perspective is whereas we didn't think that from a licensing perspective that we would have a role in that, what we're finding is that on the licensing side, GALA is in fact interacting with every single purchase holder to some extent for the information that they provide to us, verification and completion of the JAM. And then because of the interest in public access to information about folks authorized to practice in Oregon, the information on compact privilege holders are entered into our licensing system, managed and maintained there. So much more workload and interaction across what we do. We also do education and outreach to compact privilege holders, maintain information on our website. So a lot of the things that the funding mechanism of application fees are generally for. From Sarah's data, we think that there's a greater equivalency for compact privilege holders to the application fee, because of course renewal fees are lower. But most folks, at least in their privilege purchases, are, sort of a one and done in how that looks. So this is a rough differential because what it doesn't account for is the difference in that renewal cycle that I mentioned earlier about the termination of the expiration date of the compact privilege is tied to the home state, not our expiration things. So there may be individuals that end up with multiple compact privileges for the time they're here just because of when the expiration of their home state license falls relative to ours. But rough order of magnitude, if you look at the 1283 compact purchasers, the individuals since the inception, so ignoring whether or not they ever renewed their compact privilege, just that initial purchase, the differential between the $48 that we receive and what the current application fee is, and again, the cost of the application fee has changed in this period of 2018 to 2025. But at today's application fee, the revenue differential is about just under $260,000. Any questions on that? Part of why I'm framing that up in it, you'll see that when we move into the budget section. I think it would be worth the board considering whether a raise in the compact privilege fee should be increased in the near future because of the greater than anticipated workload than there was when the fee was first established.
Maybe I should know this, Michelle, but is the fee different for each state?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And the board has discretion. Each member board has discretion to establish what that fee is. The Compact Commission itself sets their portion of the fee, which is fixed. And I'm not aware. This is something that Aaron, as the delegate, can ask about. I'm not aware of them considering raising their side of the fee. But what the state controls would be the portion that comes to you.
Yeah, I haven't heard any discussions on fees during any of my meetings. If I do, I'll let you know.
I think the
Susan.
other piece that, go ahead, Susan.
I'm just curious, what was the application fee in 2016 or 2018? Do you know?
I don't have that off the top of my head. If somebody has access, it's on the network.
I want to say it was 150, but I can confirm.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I was thinking 195.
I can pull that, Susan, and then when I'm not talking, I can add that to the record.
Thank you.
Absolutely. The other piece that we should probably consider, we have a fixed application fee that's the same for both PTs and PTAs because the processing of an application is similar. Renewals, however, are two different values with PTAs paying a lower renewal fee. It appears that we have the flexibility with the compact privilege to set a different cost for PTs and PTAs in the same way that we do that here for renewals. When you're thinking about this at a future meeting and looking at the option that or the options, that could be one of the considerations. Any other questions on this piece? To clarify, I am not bringing to you today any specific recommendations for a compact privilege fee. I will be I'm just flagging that I think it's something that should be considered in the near future.
Tim has a question.
Yes.
I think just from a statement of the information that you've shared, as well as considering the time that's in labor that's involved both in reviewing cases or incidents, as well as the labor of putting them in there, that we should entertain the idea of increasing these rates. And when you consider our organization, if I'm using the wrong words, but a budget neutral organization, that we have to cover our expenses, I think that warrants us to evaluate this much closer.
Michelle, do we have the information on like other states? Like where do we fall as far as our fee?
Yeah, we Arizona is, for their side of the state fee, is 0, so they only charge what goes directly to the PTCC. And then DC is the highest, which I think is $265, $295.
It's a big range.
Yeah. And part of it, when you look at it, the states that were early adopters, like Oregon, which was, the first state to adopt the statutory language, and one of the first to go live, they tend to be kind of on the lower end. And then DC, which is a very recent addition, tends to be higher. And I think part of that is because there was more, the compact had been operating for a number of years. And so there was more data available to later adopters to set their rates.
Michelle, I found that the 2018 application fee was $150 plus the actual cost to the board of conducting the background check. And then which I believe is where the 195 that Gayla was saying comes in. And then the renewal fees were either 170 or 110, depending on the license type.
Thank you, Sarah. Sarah, could you pull up on the Compact Commission site, there's the page that lists the different fees. Other questions on this piece? Madam Chair, I will check in at this point because the next section is all on budget, and I have a number of slides. Are you okay for us to proceed, or do folks want a short break at this juncture?
How are people feeling? I can't see everybody doing. Oh, Michael's has his hand up.
Oh, a break. A break.
A break. Okay, let's do a break. 10-minute break. Is that okay?
Sounds good.
Okay, the time is 10:26 a.m. and the Oregon Board of Physical Therapy is in recess for 10 minutes. The time is 10:38 a.m. and the Oregon Board of Physical Therapy has returned from recess.
I am going to switch the share here to answer the question about fees. This is posted on the PT Compact Commission's website, and it breaks out different elements of the fees by the state portion of the fee, and then there is that processing fee that's deducted from that amount and then the $45, that's the commission fee, and then the total there. As you can see, Alabama's state portion at 85, Arizona at 0. Gonna scroll. District of Columbia, their portion is 264 to match their application. You see some 50s in line where Oregon is now. So you can see that there's quite a bit of variation. Some states that go very low, some that are equivalent to where we are, but many, particularly the more recent ones, that are at a higher point than what ours is currently. And then you can see where Washington State is currently. Any questions on that?
Yes. So it says Oregon is 50, right? Did we say 40? Did the other slide say 45? Just
Yeah, let me switch the share back to that. The 50 is the fee that we list. But that's comprised of these two portions. You only receive $48. Yeah.
Okay.
And then that processing fee for the payment processing.
Gotcha.
Great question. Okay. Okay to proceed, Madam Chair?
Yes.
Some of these pages, because they're out of spreadsheets, I will need to do some zooming in and zooming out. So I apologize for, I tried to balance getting information on one page versus readability. So the first thing that I have to show you, how is that for readability? Or do you want me to zoom in? Zoom in?
Yeah, if you can zoom in a little, that'd be good. It's better.
What you're looking at here is a projection for where the current biennium is going to end. You have the first column is the actuals that have come in, what was budgeted in those different lines, and then your over, under, and percentage of the budget where actuals are. So you can see, for example, under physical therapists, we are under pretty significantly what we thought we would be for exam applications, but we are over on renewals. So the net effect is about a 0.5 percentage above what was budgeted is what we're projecting we will end up hitting. PTAs, the performance has been a little bit better, a little over 1% above budget that we think we're going to end up. We'll see. We are expecting another round of graduations and exams and applications, so we're not quite sure what to expect as far as volumes coming up in the next couple months. And then also on the income side, here's where you see budget and totals for PT mailing lists is what 4330. We don't physically send out the diskette anymore. It's a file that gets transferred, but the chart of accounts has those words that we can't change. So a little bit of a legacy. The compact fees here We did only budget 28.8, and we've made more of that. That's in part because of the more states coming online that have created more volumes. But from all of the sales, this is what you're actually anticipated to bring in for the entire biennium from compact privileges. The
Michelle,
OHA,
Dwight, sorry to
oh,
interrupt you. Just Dwight has his hand up, so I just wanted to.
thank you. I think you're on mute, Dwight.
At the very top of this chart,
Yep.
where'd it go?
Hang on.
Okay, right here. Yeah. So what is that where it says physical therapist has got 187? What is that?
That is a coding error. So 187 sounds like part of a application fee. And instead of getting coded to like 4110, it got coded to the main line.
Okay. All right. That's all.
Yeah. Okay. Keeps wanting to kick over to the next page. So license verification fees, those have been trending down in part because folks can verify their licenses online real time and print those out, and more states are accepting those. So we'll probably continue to see that revenue decline. There are some states that still require that. But all in all, here's your bottom line that we're 1.2% above budgeted income is where we're anticipating to end this biennium. The next chart is looking at expenses. And let me adjust the size just a little bit. The first piece is payroll costs, payroll expenses, inclusive of benefits and training, board stipends, and other related costs. Here we are under what was budgeted. We're at about 95% of budget is where we anticipate to be, although you can see some significant variation in individual lines. The one piece that I'll call out is that if you look at 5146, the budget was put at the top line, but the way we've been coding out the components of the benefits are on the sublines. So that's why you see kind of the under and the over there. So if you look at the total line, you can see where we are on benefits overall. It's not unusual for us to be under on the benefit side, in part because benefit plans can change every single year. And what we typically do is budget at the maximum of what the expense could be for an employee, not knowing whether or not they will include family members, which insurance plan they'll be on. So we tend to budget at the maximum that might be available to employees, and that does change over time. The board stipends, part of what happened there is the statute changed, and so the amount of board stipend that you receive changed in the middle of the biennium. And where this board used to have a policy about a half-day meeting would receive half-day payment, the statute changed that any amount of work over sort of a nominal 20 minutes or so is paid at the full day rate. And that didn't happen until after the budget was established, and so that's why there's such an overage on that. There haven't been more meetings. There have just been higher costs than I anticipated. Continuing with on the expense side, and I will zoom in on this and then scroll down. If we look at non-payroll costs, we've still maintained lower than anticipated travel costs. Most of the board meetings are still virtual, which offsets many of those costs. Didn't have quite as many trips for other purposes within the state or out of the state. General office expenses, we've been working really hard to try to keep those as low as possible. And we'll get down into some of the contract fees. The dues and subscriptions, it gets budgeted at $20,000 because the Compact Commission is able per statute to charge a membership fee for member jurisdictions. They have waived that historically every year. And at this point, I don't expect that they will begin charging that fee in the near future, but we budget it because it's possible. Other dues and subscriptions that hit here are the Federation of State Boards of Physical Therapy membership and costs related to that, or APTA or any other dues that the board pays. Merchant account fees are typically the credit card processing. Computer support is lower than we anticipated. That has to do with the deferral of the migration and change requests that we were originally anticipating having already happened in this biennium. Rent is an interesting one because we budgeted at one level and then they raised our rent after the budget was established. But we gave back space in the form of the conference room 445, our share of that, which allowed us to reduce our rent. So we're going to end up under what we originally budgeted because we downsized our footprint in the building in spite of the rent having gone up, I think 23%. Oops. Oh, okay. So total expenses here, we're at about 86%. And one of the things that means is that where we had budgeted a deficit of roughly $292,000, we expect to end at roughly a $9,000 deficit. So our actuals, because we didn't have the expenses we were anticipating or didn't incur costs that we have in some of the placeholder accounts, we had a better performance. I'm expecting a better performance by the time this biennium ends. When we're at the May meeting, we'll be much closer to the end of the biennium, and so I can give you some updated, at least in the total line, and the detail will be in the director's report to see where we're going to end up. So all of that detail, I'm going to put it on the next slide, is where I anticipate we're going to end up for the end of the sub-biennium. Any questions on that part? Okay. One of the things that I did on the approach for budgeting for next biennium, on the last biennium, I had done multiple scenarios and presented those. This one, my approach is to make a recommendation on a budget for you to react to. And if you would like me instead to go back to the drawing board and do other scenarios based on your input, absolutely happy to do that. So even though there's only one scenario that's being presented, it doesn't mean it's the only scenario you need to consider. What this draft budget does is take the same top lines, and then I break out the assumptions going through these pieces. One of the things that I'm anticipating is that the level of complexity of the work that needs to be done in this biennium, there's been a significant increase in the sort of statewide reports, requirements, expectations that all agencies are required to do that didn't exist the prior biennium. The changes, if the bill passes, or frankly, even before the bill, we are reaching a point with our current staff where we're all pretty at capacity. And the other factor on that is when you look at our succession plan, we have 75% of staff that are from an age basis eligible for retirement within the next 5 years. So there is some organizational risk where I feel it would be in the board's best interest to have some capacity for potential volatility in staffing and to properly support the workload as we progress into the next biennium. So what I have is some increases in the budget that are not insignificant to bring some additional potential capacity. I'm not making a specific staffing recommendation. There's a couple of different ways to do it and some scenarios in there. But the budget is there that could be purposed in a couple of different ways depending on what we need to prioritize and cover for work. There, on board stipends, is a significant increase due to the new statute. This, and I should say, these columns, the first column is the first fiscal year of the biennium, the second fiscal year of the biennium. And so if you want the total for the biennium, it's this third column. Board stipends, this number is up pretty significantly, but it's because of the new statute and the way that works. It is not a change in the number of meetings. I have reduced, partly because I'm proposing some increases, I've reduced some in-state travel to bring it closer to the actuals that we've experienced for 23-25. We aren't expecting more board meetings. We may see an increase for travel and investigation. So I didn't bring it all the way down to projected actuals, but a bit above. And a similar thing with a minor reduction in out-of-state travel, but leaving some capacity, given that the Federation meeting is in this year, close enough that leaving it open for the potential for board meetings to be board members to be able to attend that annual meeting. On the sort of general office expenses, most of those I've tried to reduce or remove based on actuals that we've been experiencing. And the reduction in liability insurance, that's what's been provided to us from Department of Administrative Services Risk Management. That's their current estimate. So there's a reduction there. Dues, I am keeping the placeholder for compact fee. Mailroom charges, they stopped providing mailroom service here. Which has raised the per postage cost for us. So there's a slight increase there, but a reduction in newsletters, which we get very few of anymore. In contracted services, bring this over here. I have some pretty significant dollars allocated, partly because the cost per hour for Attorney General has gone up. It's a little over $300 per hour. And we're expecting significant rulemaking and potential hearings. So there's some dollars there to make sure that we have sufficient capacity for that. Now, that are some things, if the bill doesn't pass, if there aren't hearings, then those costs wouldn't be incurred. But this makes sure that we have placeholder capacity within the budget to cover what we're anticipating may happen within the biennium. I think a similar increase based on the Employment Department hearings officer that has to do with administrative hearings as well. So again, a placeholder for possible hearings. Rent is going up again next biennium. I think it's gone up every biennium. Used to be $1.37, maybe 10 years ago. Next biennium, it'll be $2.30 per square foot. What I've budgeted at is what the current restack project in this building that I've talked about in the past, where they're remodeling this building, they're moving us, and then will eventually move us again. Based on their estimates, they're projecting and are using in their budgets that we will need more square feet than we currently have. We're going to push back on that and make other decisions and explore our other facility options. But for now, what they're projecting, that's the rent that's budgeted there. And then there are, in the software line, pretty much all software costs are going up. So we've increased that placeholder. So you can see that the total expenditures for the biennium are roughly 2.2 million. And let me give you some context on that. Dwight?
So do you have to pay for the move when they move you like that?
They have not given clear information on that. I think it will end up being a little bit of both. I think they'll provide some services, possibly some movers to bring things up. But things like reconnecting equipment, potentially some IT backend networking, some of those will likely fall to the agency. And then depending on how long we will be displaced, there would be costs potentially, or our suite number would change. So things that relate to, letterhead and fax machines and things like that.
So do you have kind of money hidden for that, or?
Yeah, I have some of it under like general office expenses on that, or other contracted services. DAS charges. Yeah.
Okay, just curious.
Yeah. Great question. So then this worksheet gives you the view. Let me come in here. it's a comparison of the proposed budget and the columns fiscal year, first fiscal year, second fiscal year. The third column here is the biennium total, the prior biennium, the one that we're in, and then your difference from prior. So here you get to see what's going up, what's going down. My assumptions on revenues are conservative. What I've done is I've taken our actuals through February and the forecast that you saw in other reports, and I've given it a very conservative 1% increase over this year's actuals. We've been running, if you look back in time over like the last 5 biennia, there's a lot of variability. It ends up being somewhere between 1 and 4%. But since there's so much we don't know and kind of what the impacts would be, and compact privilege patterns are still fairly opaque, I'm using the low end of that average. So the numbers for income are listed here. I have compact fees highlighted because that is somewhere where I think there should be some further discussion on the revenue side. In part because after all this, it ends up being about a 2% increase in income, but in hard numbers, that's roughly $29,000 in additional revenue. And because of this, I think that this is a fee the board should consider whether it's warranted based on the workload needs to support it, additional revenue to fund that. On the expense side, here's where you see about a 21% overall payroll increase for the additional capacity. And then here you can see board stipends just based on the statutory change. This is no additional meetings, but because of the new statute, it ends up being 182% over last biennium. You can see some of the reductions that I'm trying to make in other expenses. And then here, under contract services, the 6,400, that's where you see also some significant increases over the prior biennium because of what we're anticipating that again may or may not happen. So the budget ends up being for expenses a 19% increase or an additional $363,000. So let me give you a little more context on that because obviously that's a deficit budget. It's a deficit budget because we do maintain an ending balance. And slide over here on the far side, just for context, if we look at our ending balances for our reserve fund, here's where we've been the last several biennia. We've been able to maintain roughly around that $1 million mark. I'm going to scroll back this way. Down here, reserves are to cover any unanticipated liabilities. The board is self-insured, and there are always unanticipated costs that could come up because we don't know. Some of the biggest can be like administrative hearings or other expenses like that that we don't budget for, that you need to have capacity financially to get through those. The other perspective is that because we're on a biannual renewal, there is a period of time at the beginning of a biennium before we hit the renewal season, sort of that 6 months where we're at the lowest point from the prior renewal, which is your largest source of revenue. You need to be able to get from the end of the biennium all the way to the next renewal period over that 2-year cycle. This board has typically maintained 9 to 12 months of equivalent operating reserves. On the other regular state agencies, the Budget and Management Office and the LFO, which is the Legislative Fiscal Office, say that while boards can have a target for more, that the minimum a board should have is 4 to 9 months reserve. And the variability in that is tied to what type of revenue they have and when it comes in. So with that context, what you have on the first column is the budgeted for 23-25. Here's where you see that there was the budgeted shortfall. You can see the actuals where we ended up, the projected ending reserves. This here is the months of coverage. And then in the green, the proposed budget amount versus the budget of 23-25. That's where you see the 19% over the prior budget. And a larger budget shortfall. That does take us to about 5 months of operating expenses at the end of next biennium, if all of the expenses we're anticipating come through, and if revenue stays at that conservative no more than 1% increase, which is low, but based on how we historically end up with actuals lower than budgeted, I anticipate that that will probably be closer to the 8 to 9 months than the 5, but budgeting here that if all of the expenses are incurred, it would still leave just over 5 months of reserve. And with that very large number of slides and numbers and spreadsheets, I'll pause on this slide and questions. Let me say one more thing while you're thinking. This board, Tim had made the point earlier about being budget neutral, living within the budget expenses, which is the primary piece. But the secondary assumption is that the board, if it has a high reserve, should run at a deficit before it shifts to raising fees for licensing. And so that is in part where we have sufficient funds. We're running down our reserve funds, but prior boards have wanted to take that approach before considering any licensing increases. This does not assume, other than I think that the compact fee is arguably too low based on the work. This does not include, and actually this does not even include that. This includes no fee increases. I would still encourage the board to consider in future meetings a discussion about whether that and only that one would be appropriate to increase at some time in the near future.
Thank you, Michelle. You did a good job of breaking that all down. Tim has his hand up.
Excellent.
I was going to say, Michelle, I mean, wonderful job of presenting a very clear picture of what this could look like. I mean, obviously conservative numbers for a specific reason for our sustainability. I guess I feel pretty strongly of the data we've gotten from the compact in regards to us needing to consider raising the rates. What steps do we need to go through to have a conversation about that?
I think what we can do is at a future meeting, we'll put it on an agenda for discussion. And what we can do is bring to you some more specific data or potential recommendations. You know, we can show you the data again on what other jurisdictions are doing, and give you some options to discuss.
And then, thank you. That's wonderful. And then the second thing is our reserves. Where are those kept, and are we getting a percentage or interest on that amount?
It is to an extent, yes, but it is just a regular bank account. There are some limits on what state agencies can do as far as investment funds, or anything that has a higher risk level. So that is something that the board could discuss. Semi-independent agencies have some more flexibility in that. Historically, this board has had an investment fund in the past, but with some of the volatility and risk, I think at the turn of the current millennium, the policy was to move away from those kinds of higher risk investment funds.
Okay, thank you.
I just agree with what Tim said. I think it's reasonable to think about the work need and effort that goes into especially compact privileges, and then trying to align that. I don't know if this is 100% accurate, but it feels like complaints are increasing. Like part of that, you know, as I think about the number of therapists in Oregon also increasing, but like whether they all take work, and so I think that's a piece. And then the only other like little tidbit, this isn't a large thing, but since I work for a public institution, I don't take a stipend, and so likely my replacement would have a stipend.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael. And I did budget, because you never know, sadly, when somebody's going to move to Wisconsin. So the board stipends is budgeted, assuming that all board members would qualify for and take the stipend.
And you do such a spectacular job with the level of detail, and that, you know, we're this close, I think it's just amazing. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you. I on investigations, and I'm scrolling back to the director's report here. You can see that cases opened and closed per biennium. If you look at the historical biennia, they are up, and these are, you know, this is of March, and there's still months left. So I imagine that we're going to end up close to where 21-23 was. So in the last two biennia, there has been an increase. And, you know, compact has been a big part of that increase. What these numbers don't show is that the complexity of cases in the last 4 or 5 years has increased significantly for a number of reasons, not just because of the types of complaints themselves, but because of the investigative process itself and the difficulty in acquiring records and other things as part of that process. Nothing to do with respondents or complainants, but just working with a much more complex healthcare system where records managers may be in a completely different state, and not, and that the individual parties involved in the investigation don't have access. And so you have to go through these other parties and other things. So definitely a great call out on just the complexity of work across all all of our services have gone up. And I will bring it back to here. So the process, semi-independent boards do budgeting through the administrative rulemaking process, whereas regular other state agencies go through the legislative process, and those agencies are and under the governor's budget and are actively in the process of seeking out their funding in the legislature. Our process would be that when you're ready, you would make a motion to initiate the administrative rulemaking process, and then information related to the proposed budget for next biennium would go out for public comment. And then you would adopt a budget after you've had that public comment period. So the question before you today is, are you satisfied with this proposed budget for 25-27, such that you'd want to move forward with that process? Or are you wanting other scenarios presented? And I should clarify that really on the expense side, about the only place that I would have any control would be on the personal services side, to try to reduce the numbers there. I don't recommend it because of what we've been talking about it, but that's what an alternate scenario would be.
Does anybody have any concerns or questions about, oh, Dwight, yes. Go Dwight.
I was, excuse me, I would say Michelle's done a good job of putting all this together. I don't need to see another scenario. My vote would be to go with what she's put together.
I agree. This is Hoku.
If that's the case and there aren't any other concerns or questions, then we would need a motion to proceed.
Okay. I move to initiate the public administrative rulemaking process pertaining to the 2025 to 2027 biennium budget.
Second.
Dwight seconded, moved and seconded. Timothy?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
Sandra?
She left, I think.
I think she's.
She may have had to go.
No, she's here.
Oh, she
Aye.
is. Okay.
Okay. Hoku?
Aye.
Michael?
I think
I
you
don't-
muted.
Oh, sorry, aye.
Thank you. Susan?
Aye.
Erica?
Aye.
Dwight?
Aye.
Madam Chair, motion carries unanimously. How's everyone doing? Okay. The next item is I can bring this down a little. Just a much more brief update on the current legislative session. What I have in this part of it is the same document that was used in January, in part to show on the timeline. We are today at the deadline for the first chamber to post a work session. So any bill that doesn't have a work session posted by the end of today, unless it's gone to one of the special committees we've talked about before, will go no further this session. It might be resurrected as an amendment into another bill that is continuing forward. So what we typically do is if there are any bills of interest that do die today, we continue to monitor similar bills and any amendments to those similar bills to see if it crops back up. The big change since last time is the introduction of the APTA Oregon Bill 3824. Which moved very quickly. Originally, we anticipated the hearing would be next week, and you would have time to look at it and talk about it before that. But they did hold a public hearing on the 18th of March, and the work session has already been scheduled for April 3rd. And in the next agenda item, I'll go into a little more detail about what's been happening there. I had referenced the other health professions that have been interested in the compacts. There were a number of hearings held. There are mixed positions on these compacts. The other boards are either opposed or neutral on the bill, but have significant concerns about cost impacts. But they also have work sessions scheduled in the next 2 weeks. Sarah touched on some of the, in the Data Equity Summit discussion, there was the bill related to data equity. That bill did have a hearing. There is an additional public hearing and work session, so still moving forward. And the other two bills that I had flagged previously, one has passed out of committee, but had a referral to Ways and Means, which means there's dollars attached to it. So the Ways and Means committee has to approve the funding, even though the policy committee has approved the policy side of the bill. And then the bill to require health insurance to pay providers who are joining an in-network practice the same as providers during that credentialing period, which is pretty exciting. It passed completely out of the first chamber, out of the House, and has been referred over to the Senate. So that one is moving very quickly and is over to the second chamber side. And then the remainder of the page is just some reminders and resources on if you are looking at bills or if you are choosing to testify personally on any bills, some highlights about how to do that process and what moves next. In May, there are a bunch of other bills that could have an impact on this board. I'm waiting to go into much detail on those until we see if they make it past these waypoints and move forward. In May, we'll have a much better sense of where things are, and I anticipate giving you updates on additional bills that could impact either the board or the physical therapy profession. Any questions on that general update? Okay to proceed to the next item, Madam Chair?
Yes.
All right, so let's talk about the APTA Oregon's bill that they introduced. It is, I believe, 32 pages, a lot of pages. So I won't go through all of the sections on it. There is a link through the agenda that can take, if you want to drill down to it in detail. The highlights are that it implements the FSBPT's Model Practice Act, which this board has discussed. And if we look here under the kind of this section of the bill language, in addition to the changes in the language from the Model Practice Act, the bill seeks to authorize PTs to have prescribing authority limited to durable medical equipment. It would allow a physical therapist to administer vaccines to specified individuals under specified circumstances. would allow a PT to sign and date a certificate for a disabled person parking permit application. And changes the requirements or adds to the exemptions, physical therapists, so that you don't have, a PT would not have to get a medical imaging license in order to use sonographic equipment if that equipment is being used for PT purposes. Okay. And then it does change some membership requirements for board members in that language. That is coming out of the Model Practice Act language on that piece. The association has been very transparent. They, when the bill dropped, which was on the very last day that bills could be introduced. So it was after your last meeting when we thought it might happen, and then we thought it wasn't going to happen because we were at the last day and it hadn't happened. And then the next morning, they had hit it, the deadline the evening before. They asked for some input from board staff on the bill. We went through the language and pointed out some areas where it seems the bill draft didn't include all the language from the Model Practice Act. So one of the recommendations we made or asked them is if that was intentional or if it was omitted. They felt it was an omission, it wasn't an intentional piece, and so they are seeking an amendment that would add in the rest of the Model Practice Act. And the other piece that we spoke to them about had to do with term protection. And watch your eyes, I'm going to find it here. The language that they used was creating regulatory oversight by this board for entities that would use physiotherapy or DPT, not just individuals. We don't have, obviously, the capacity. We don't regulate facilities or entities. So we don't have that expertise or that capacity. We share that information with them because that would require us to, and we don't have a funding mechanism to pay for it. So it would create the need to create a whole structure to come up with some form of fee to fund the enforcement or the regulation of entities or facilities. And then the other piece is that they had this section here that would have obligated us to seek civil injunction with the shall for every instance of it, as opposed to a more of a permissive may seek if it's appropriate, which would have had a significant increase in cost related to, civil pursuit. In the testimony, what's not called out in the description, but is allowed through the change in the definition, which allows needle insertion. And I'll move here to, you see the dated definition of the practice of physical therapy. In their testimony and by the bill sponsor and others, part of what they're intending in this change is to enable dry needling, which all but 5 states anymore allow because it has become standard for entry-level education to have some elements of that. As some of you may recall, the current scope of practice or the definition of physical therapy specifically didn't allow penetration of the skin. And so it was determined, I think in 2014, that dry needling would not fall under the scope, even if it were part of entry-level programs. To address legal opinion at the time, I believe. And their testimony makes it pretty clear that they are interested, should this bill pass, in the board establishing by rule requirements for dry needling. The association did ask for us to present testimony, which put us in a little bit of a difficult situation because you haven't met yet to give an opinion. So what I did do, and that's included here as well, is submit testimony explaining the Model Practice Act, explaining the work that the board has done to date with the association, and explain the evolution of the profession from a bachelor's degree to a doctoral degree, and when that occurred. And then some discussion of the feedback that the board has received and that you've already discussed in public session about folks wanting to know why there's a narrower scope in Oregon than there is in other states that they may be licensed in and practicing in, and interest in some of the other pieces. So we talked through that. And so what I described was that the board has been having discussions about the Model Practice Act and identified it as a strategic initiative and had been discussing the potential for a legislative concept in the near future. And that we've been working with them and have requested amendments for some things that were problematic. In the last section, you can see that then we took no opinion on any of the other specific sections like prescribing authority or sonography, but referenced that while the Model Practice Act enables them, the issue is that there are other statutes regulated by other bodies that limit the information. So we did discuss this with the governor's office because, as you know, agencies in the executive branch cannot take a position unless authorized to do so. The authorization that we received was that the board could take a neutral stance at this time because of the need for an amendment. So this was filed as just informational neutral testimony on the MPA sections and then no opinion at all on the remaining sections. That's where things are to date. The hearing, if you follow the link to the bill, you can see all of the testimony is posted online. So far, there is one opposed testimony. When you open the document, I don't know if the file didn't go through, but it just says, don't pass this bill. There are quite a number of licensees who have testified in support of the bill. And then at the public hearing itself, the bill sponsor, Representative Wallen, and then 3 PTs gave testimony on the bill. A representative from, I believe, the Oregon Medical Association did then testify in opposition to the bill. The testimony was specifically for the vaccination section. And then they raised general concerns in their testimony. It's interesting because they said I'm not familiar with what the educational level is for physical therapists. So I'm not sure that they're qualified to do all this stuff. And then raise questions about whether it really was being done in any other states. And then concerns really more on the vaccine side, questions about whether physical therapists would have access to the patient's medical record in order to properly document it, or if there would be any monitoring or follow-up of the individual after the administration of the vaccine. So that's what's transpired so far. It, as I said, did get a work session. I have not yet been asked for any additional information from the committee, but do anticipate being available for the work session on the 3rd, should they have any questions. Because the public hearing side has passed, the board doesn't have to take a different position at this time, but I would anticipate it may during the May meeting before it goes to the second chamber. If you would be interested in, once we see what the amendments are and anything else, if you would like to take anything other than a neutral position, then I think it would be the time that to be prepared to have that conversation. Particularly if you are interested in seeking permission to be in support of the bill. So with that download, I'll stop. See if there's any questions or any discussion you want to have on any of that today. Madam Chair, I'm not hearing any at this time.
Okay, we can move on.
Okay. So then, with statutes must come rulemaking. As we now do at each board meeting, I have updated the rulemaking forecast as of today. January through March, the Division 40 changes were adopted. Those went into effect on March 1st. I will note that we had originally anticipated in that first quarter continuing to work with the Rule Advisory Committee to do that remaining piece of Division 40 about discharge. With the workload and what came up with the introduction of this bill, we have not met with the Rule Advisory Committee yet. It may get further deferred if the bill has legs, and part of that is it doesn't make sense for us to do rulemaking that might be impacted by statutory changes. So for right now, we've moved it down into April, June, but it frankly might fall into the next year or the back half of the July through December. What I am anticipating, of course, is you've started the process today for the adoption of the budget. So all the public feedback and consideration will be your May meeting. And then we do, before the end of the biennium, I anticipate bringing to you language to start the process at the May meeting for these pieces. They won't be impacted by the Model Practice Act, that 3824. Those are other statutes that we're obligated to implement. And then as we get a little further out, July through December, if the bill moves forward, I'm anticipating the asterisk is just a significant amount of rulemaking. And then the Compact Commission typically updates their rules sometime in that October timeframe. So if they're making rule changes, then we would be required to review those and adopt those into your rules. Any questions on that? Next section is other business. We from staff don't have any other old business to bring back under this section. If anyone else has anything, not seeing anything. So that means we're getting very close to adjournment. A note that the next scheduled board meeting, public and executive sessions, May 16th, in person. The meeting would start at 8:30 for members. You'd have an arrival slightly before that to get settled. And members of the public, even though it's an in-person meeting, may still attend via web stream. With that, Madam Chair, I will stop talking.
Thank you, Michelle. That was good. Lots of great information, and also can see a lot of really hard work to get into all of that and then break it down for us. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
The time is 11:44 a.m. and the Oregon Board of Physical Therapy is adjourned.